With respect to payback, at least for uh, regular projects, standalone projects, the decision rule is simple. If the payback period is shorter than what the firm determines is the cutoff, then you accept the project. A lot of times firms say, okay, I'm going to accept projects that are paying themselves back in 2 years or less. So let's put in payback cutoff as an input. Let's say that's 2. For example, if my criteria was the regular payback periods, I would have gone ahead with this project because 1.87 is less than 2. But if I was doing the same thing on a discounted payback, I would not have. Let's actually put in, let's put in this icon. It's going to be based on a formula. I'm going to reverse the icon order. If the payback period is greater or equal to, actually greater than the payback cutoff plus a little cushion, I'm going to make that a red light. Otherwise, if it is greater or equal to, cutoff minus a little cushion. Copy, paste. Let's change the format of this. Okay. The only reason I put in that cushion is just if you get a yellow light, you're kind of in the boundary or in the bubble. Well, you can decide based on what you want to do. I mean, if you get 198, it's not that different from 2. That's kind of the reason I'm putting it in there. Now, payback period is rather popular, and the biggest reason why it's popular, it's easy to calculate and easy to interpret. I get my money back in so many years. That's it. But it should never be used by its own. That's one thing. And two, uh, firms actually kind of prefer it for short-term and relatively liquid projects. Let's say you're General Electric. That company has more divisions than there are senators in the United States Senate. Okay, and if you're going to manage a division somewhere in Milwaukee, and these guys are going to make a decision on an investment that's about $1 million for GE proper, $1 million is just a round of error. Okay, you know, headquarters of GE should not be worried about those projects. But if you tell them that, oh, you're going to make all the decisions based on NPV, typically those sorts of calculations require a lot of thought. Sometimes they tell them if the projects are small enough, you can go ahead and take the projects if they pay themselves back in so many years, either on a regular basis or a present value basis. That way, you don't have to worry about it. This is kind of a corporate governance issue. If you tell people you're going to make decisions based on net present value and projects has potentially 10 years of cash flows. The people who are coming up with the projects, even without any fraud concerns, it's their baby, right? They kind of tend to be biased towards being optimistic, especially they say, oh, we may not make that much money in the first few years, but this is going to make us a lot of money, you know, during the last 5 years of the project. Well, those cash flow projections are forecasts, and forecasts of long-term cash flows are obviously a lot more uh, what you want to call uncertain. So you don't want them to rely on such numbers. You just tell them, go ahead and go ahead with the project if it pays itself back in 2 years, 3 years, whatever your cutoff may be. But you don't want to use payback period for projects that are major. Then, you're interested in uh, whether or not real value is added to the firm and or how much value is added to the firm. There's one more thing we're going to do to handle the issue with IRR when the cash flows are not conventional. As I said before, we're going to calculate something called modified IRR. The way we're going to do it, your book talks about three different ways, but I'm going to use only one of them. Uh, we're going to modify the cash flow such that if there is a year in the future, let me make this into a 5-year project. There is that year with -20, right? Basically, if there is a negative cash flow in the future, we're going to make that into zero. But to compensate for that, we're going to calculate the present value of that negative cash flow and add it to the initial cost. And to do that, let me see. First things first, starting year one, I'm going to say if this clean cash flow is negative, make it zero, otherwise itself. As you can see, I immediately made that zero, right? And I will even mark those cells. If I have modified it, I'm going to make it a black background. Conditional formatting. Let me do this. New rule. And the formula is simple. If the clean cash flow is negative, do the format such that it has a black background. Voila. Computationally speaking, that does not mean anything. It is only a visual aid for you to tell you that you have modified that cash flow. And one thing we're going to do, and let me change the color of that. I'm going to make that black as well. Uh, that year zero cash flow is basically negative of the cost of the project, right?